5:38 in the afternoon on May 2, 2026, a wall of superheated gas and rock detonated 4 kilometers down the southwestern slope of the most perfectly symmetrical volcano on Earth. Nobody saw it coming from that direction. Nobody was watching that gully. The sensors were trained somewhere else. That is the detail that matters. Not the eruption itself. The direction. This mountain had been threatening from the east for 115 consecutive days. Lava bleeding. Rocks falling. Alerts blaring. Then on day 116, without warning, it broke from the south. And there were people inside that zone. Farmers. Families. People who had looked at the official evacuation order and said, "I cannot leave my pig." That is where the story begins. Not with the science. With the pig. Mount Mayon. Albay Province, the Philippines. 116 days into a continuous eruption that has not paused, not cooled, not slowed since January 6, 2026. 2,800 people are sleeping on gymnasium floors tonight. Sulfur dioxide output hit 2,147 metric tons in a single day, just this week. 376 rocks the size of refrigerators broke loose from the summit in a single 24-hour window. And a U.S. geophysicist has now looked directly into a camera and said that what is building beneath this mountain could rival the eruption of Mount St. Helens. The Philippines call this volcano the Pompeii Maker. It has earned that name. And right now, it is no longer bluffing. Here is what makes this different from every other eruption you have ever watched. The footage of the May 2 collapse was not captured by a tourist. It was not a phone video. It was recorded by a high-resolution monitoring camera operated by the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, known as PHIVOLCS. These scientists have been watching this mountain 24 hours a day every single day for over 100 consecutive days. They have sensors that can detect a rock the size of a fist breaking free from 1.5 kilometers away. They have seismic arrays. They have satellite thermal imaging. They have models built from decades of historical eruption data. And still, on the afternoon of May 2nd, they could not tell anyone which gully was going to go. They could only issue one warning: get out of the 6-kilometer zone. And the people inside that zone, the ones with 1 cow and 3 pigs and no income beyond what that livestock represents, looked at the smoking mountain and stayed. Because a single pig in this region is roughly 6 months of accumulated labor. Because the average rural household income here runs about 8,000 Philippine pesos per month. That is approximately $140. And you do not walk away from $140 a month in savings because a government sign tells you to. So they stayed. And on May 2nd, the fire came down a gully no one was expecting. To understand what you are watching, you need to understand how this eruption started. On January 6, 2026, PHIVOLCS raised the alert level from 2 to 3. Within 24 hours, the governor of Albay Province ordered 3,000 residents to evacuate the 6-kilometer permanent danger zone surrounding the summit. The lava began flowing down the Banga Gully on the southeastern side within days. By February, the eruption had not stopped. By March, satellite thermal sensors operated by an organization called Morova were showing Mayon glowing red on every single orbital overpass, every single day. This was something this volcano had not done in living memory. It was not exploding. It was bleeding, continuously, for weeks, then months. 3 separate lava flows advancing at the same time. The lava in the Basid Gully on the east face stretched 3.8 kilometers from the crater. The Banga Gully on the southeast reached 3.2 kilometers. The Maysay Gully on the south extended 1.6 kilometers. 3 rivers of molten rock, all alive, all moving, all draining heat and gas from a chamber that was simultaneously refilling from below. That is the part nobody was saying loudly enough. The eruption visible on the surface was not the main event. It was the relief valve. Then came May 1st, the day before the collapse. At 2:41 in the morning, Mayon produced a strombolian burst. At 2:04 in the afternoon, another. At 7:39 that night, a third. At 8:05, a fourth. 4 explosive events in a single calendar day. The most active 24-hour period in the entire 116-day sequence. Fivolks recorded 39 volcanic earthquakes that day. 21 of them were episodes of continuous tremor, some lasting 44 uninterrupted minutes. The mountain was not just erupting. It was vibrating. It was preparing. And here is what made it worse. The lava pouring out of Mayon is not the kind you see in Hawaii. It is not runny. It is not fast-moving. Volcanologists classify it as hypersthene-andesite. It is thick. It is sticky. It is saturated with trapped gas that cannot escape as the lava moves. So instead of flowing freely down the slope and cooling in channels, it builds. Layer on layer. Stack on stack. On steep summit terrain measuring over 30 degrees of incline, those stacked layers become structurally unstable. And then one day, without the explosion, without the warning tremor, without the directional signal the sensors were calibrated to catch, a section simply peels away. That is what the world saw on May 2nd. Not an eruption. Collapse. Inside a pyroclastic flow, the temperature runs approximately 700 degrees Celsius. That is over 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough to vaporize human tissue on contact. Hot enough, in the physical sense, to freeze a person permanently in the last position they occupied. This is the exact mechanism that killed everyone at Pompeii in 79 AD when Vesuvius collapsed. And it is the exact mechanism that killed 79 farmers at Mayon's own Bonga Gully in February of 1993. They were tending crops inside the 6-kilometer zone. The flow came. By the time they saw it, they were already inside it. That was not the last time. To understand why this mountain does what it does, you need to understand where it sits. Mayon rises directly above the Philippine Trench, one of the deepest subduction zones on the surface of this planet. The Pacific Plate is sliding underneath the Philippine Plate at a rate of approximately 8 centimeters per year. 8 centimeters of dense oceanic crust grinding into the mantle every year, melting, rising, feeding the magma chamber beneath this summit for hundreds of thousands of years. In 2025, satellite ground deformation data detected something analysts did not expect. The summit was inflating. The chamber was filling faster than the lava was releasing pressure. The eruption you are watching on the surface, the one bleeding lava down 3 sides for 116 days, is not emptying the system. The system is recharging faster than it is draining. This is where it gets worse. Mayon is not an isolated volcano. It is one active node in a chain. The same subduction zone that feeds Mayon also fed Tal, which erupted in 2020, displaced 700,000 people and killed 39. The same zone feeds Pinatubo, which erupted in 1991 in the second largest volcanic eruption of the entire 20th century. Pinatubo injected enough sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere to drop global average temperatures by half a degree Celsius. 847 people died directly. The agricultural and economic effects lasted years. Over geologic time, the same magma plumbing beneath this chain has produced caldera-forming eruptions measuring magnitude 6 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index. A VI6 event is the threshold scientists associate with a volcanic winter. Not a cold season. A multi-year disruption of global agricultural systems. Crop failures. Famine. The destabilization of food supply chains across entire continents. It happened before. After Mount Tambora erupted in 1815 at VI7, the following year became known as the year without a summer. Snowfall was recorded in New England in June. Crops failed across Europe. Approximately 100,000 additional deaths from famine and cholera followed across the northern hemisphere. Now here is the detail that almost nobody is talking about. Mayon erupted in 1814, 1 year before Tambora. The atmospheric ash from Mayon's own VI4 eruption in 1814 was already loaded into the upper stratosphere when Tambora detonated. This volcano, the one currently bleeding lava down 3 sides at this moment, was a contributing factor in the worst climate disaster in modern recorded history. And it is still here, still active, still building. On the ground, the numbers tell a story that is almost impossible to sit with. Albay province has a total population of roughly 1.5 million people. The city of Legazpi, 10 kilometers from the summit, holds approximately 200,000 residents. Tabaco City, 9 kilometers away, holds 140,000. Daraga Municipality, 7 kilometers away, holds 135,000. Every one of these population centers sits within the historical reach of pyroclastic flows that have come off this mountain in the last 300 years. Volcano does not have the enforcement resources to keep people out of the 6-kilometer danger zone. The Albay provincial police do not have them either. So officials have constructed a compromise that says everything about what is happening here. A special pass system. Farmers can apply for brief re-entry permits with documented reasons. Local journalists recorded the following justifications from actual permit applicants. My pig is about to give birth and needs supervision. My chickens have not been fed in 2 days. I need to harvest the rice before the ash falls on it. The Baikal regional outlet bikol.ph reported in mid-January that some families were re-entering the 6-kilometer danger zone 3 times a day, walking past the warning signs, walking beneath the smoking summit, because the animal they are walking toward is not a pet. It is the family's entire financial reserve for the year. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is the geometry of poverty. There is a town in Albay called Kagsawa. It does not exist anymore. On February 1, 1814, Mayon produced a VI4 eruption. The ash column climbed 50 kilometers into the atmosphere. Then the column collapsed. A pyroclastic flow rolled down the southern flank at full speed and hit the town of Kagsawa in minutes. The villagers ran into the stone Catholic church. They believed the walls would hold. They were entombed. The entire town was buried under 9 meters of volcanic ash. The roof of the church collapsed under the weight. Only the bell tower, the tallest point in the village, extended high enough above the ash surface to remain visible. That bell tower is still there today. 212 years later, it is still standing in the dirt, surrounded by a tourist park with picnic tables, with Mayon smoking visibly in the background. The death toll from that eruption is estimated between 1,200 and 2,000 people. The exact number will never be known because most of the bodies were never recovered. They are still down there, beneath the soil, beneath the layers of ash, beneath the picnic tables. The same volcano, the same southern flank, the same direction, it just moved again on May 2nd. Stephen Burns, a U.S. geophysicist who has worked on volcanic monitoring data for years, looked directly at the footage of the May 2nd collapse and said what he saw plainly. These eruptions, he said, are getting bigger and bigger. Something really big, perhaps, is coming soon for the Philippines. And if it is big enough, that could impact the entire world. He did not stop there. He compared Mayon to Vesuvius. He suggested Mayon may actually be the larger volcanic system. He raised the possibility of a VI6 eruption. He raised the possibility of global volcanic winter. And he raised the implication that most people are not prepared to hear said aloud. That the southern flank of Mayon, the same flank that partially collapsed on May 2nd in what was, relatively speaking, a minor event, could fail in a much larger way. A full lateral collapse. A debris avalanche. A landscape rewritten in minutes. The mechanism Mount St. Helens demonstrated in 1980. There is no warning system on Earth that gives civilians more than a few minutes of lead time before an event like that. As of the day the script is written, Volcano has not lowered the alert level. They have not announced an end to the eruption. They have not announced a slowdown. The lava is still advancing. The rockfalls are still being recorded. The sulfur dioxide output remains above 2,000 metric tons per day. There have been 41 pyroclastic flows recorded at Mayon so far this year. And there are still approximately 4,500 people living inside the official danger zone right now. Today, despite the orders, the real question is not whether Mayon will erupt again. It is erupting. The real question is not whether the next pyroclastic flow will descend. There have been 41 already. The real question, the one that the monitoring cameras and the seismic arrays and the satellite thermal sensors and the decades of accumulated scientific data cannot definitively answer, is whether the roughly 700,000 people living downhill, downwind, and downstream from this volcano in Legazpi and Tabaco and Daraga and Camalig are absorbing what the world just watched on May 2nd. The bell tower of Kagsawa Church has been standing in the ash for over 2 centuries. It is not a monument. It is a measurement. A marker of exactly how high the debris reached the last time this volcano did what it is still capable of doing. The only thing that has changed since 1814 is the number of people who would be in its path.